Before we get started with the episode, just want to give you a quick heads up that A Productive Conversation has officially moved hosts. Not me, the place where we host the podcast. So if you're hearing this, everything worked just fine. But if you ever have any issues, you can always find the latest episodes at aproductiveconversation.transistor.fm. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's get on with the show. Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy, and it is Way Back Week, which means we revisit a conversation from way back when, and it's with none other than Austin Kleon. Now, before we get into that conversation, Austin was kind enough to provide us with a quick update on what's been going on. He'll share that with you right after this. But then from there, we dive into the rituals and rhythms that support creative work, how boundaries help protect attention, and what it means to truly pay attention in a world full of noise. Austin's reflections are thoughtful, funny, and incredibly useful, whether you're a writer, an artist, or just trying to find a better way to move through your day. So without further ado, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Austin Kleon. But before that, let's hear from Austin himself as to what's been going on in his world since our conversation almost a decade ago.
Hi, Mike, and hi, Mike's listeners. Been a while since we talked. I somehow have managed not to publish another book yet. I find that it's a lot more fun reading books than it is writing them. But I am working on a new book. It's going to come out next year. It's called Don't Call It Art, and it's a list of 10 things that I learned from being around my creative kids when they were really little. It's about having fun, not taking your work too seriously, and going about your art and creative work with a sense of play. And other than that, I've had a really fun time with my weekly newsletter, which has become a twice-weekly newsletter, actually. So if you like what you hear today in this interview, I hope you'll pop over to austinkleon.com and sign up for my weekly newsletter, because I think we have something like close to 300,000 readers now, and it's my favorite thing that I do online. So thanks.
Thanks so much for joining me, Austin. It's been something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So you've got a new book coming out, and actually, as of now, it's pretty much out in the wild. It's Keep Going: 10 Ways to Stay Creative in Good Times and Bad. This seems to be the book that creatives need right about now.
I hope so. I mean, I think everybody needs it. I needed it. I mean, that's why I wrote it. It's a funny thing because my other books were written for other people. Like Steal Like an Artist was written for like a younger, dumber version of myself. Show Your Work was written for my audience who kind of kept asking me all these questions about self-promotion. And this book was the first book that I wrote because I needed to read it myself. And so it sort of is a departure in that sense. And I think, like a lot of people, particularly in the States, we kind of, we just keep waking up every morning, and it seems like things have gotten dumber and meaner overnight. And to add to that, I think every creative person I know is kind of hitting up against the wall of realizing that like creative work doesn't necessarily ever get any easier, that it's always kind of a struggle to constantly reinvent and come up with new ideas. And so I wanted to write a book about how to have a more long-term approach to this stuff and to simply pull yourself through the days.
Well, one of the things that you talk about right out of the gate in the book, and this is something that I know will appeal to the productivity folks that are listening, is the idea of, because there's so much kind of chaos, may not be the right word, I'm going to use it anyways, in the day-to-day life, the importance of having routinization and having routines. You talk about like a daily routine. What does yours look like? And why do you think that having a daily routine, maybe not just even a morning routine, but something that is consistent throughout the day or even just a morning and evening routine is so important?
That's a great question. I personally think that I think creative work is like, um, I think it's like it's a verb. It's like an activity. It's like it's like you're an athlete or something. I think it's Haruki Murakami who's written about how much training to run helps him write novels. But I think that, creative work is about getting in there every day and having a daily practice. And I think routine is the thing that really makes sure that you do that practice every day. If I had to describe my routine, I'd probably borrow John Waters' quip that he thinks things up in the morning and he sells them in the afternoon. So the morning is kind of my creative time. Like I get up with our kids who are super young. I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old boys, and we get up in the morning and we have breakfast and we kind of putter around, and then my wife will get up and I'll get her coffee and breakfast, and then I'll come up and I'll write for a couple hours. And then we have lunch together and I get my kid on the school bus, and then I come upstairs and I do all the things that kind of the more admin based stuff. I'll answer emails, I'll do a podcast like we're doing now. I'll do the kind of more business end stuff. And there's something about having that routine. And I keep fairly 9 to 5 hours, I would say, like just like a banker, basically, banker's hours. And I think for me, there's something about the morning that's more. I've always been kind of a morning person, and that's where I try to cram all my creative work into. And then the afternoon, I've always thought is this weird mongrel time, as Dickens called it, where I don't know that many people who are afternoon people. So I kind of, this is the time where I like to take calls and stuff like that. And then in the evening, I just try to unplug and hang out with my family, and then I read a bunch. So that's pretty much like generally what the day looks like. And then there's always a walk in there somewhere. I walk with my wife every day. We take about a 3 or 4 mile walk. So
One of the things that you bring up in the book is the idea of having a place, like a place where you can go and kind of do the creative work. And I think that I've talked about this a little bit before about having like productivity zones in my office where like certain work happens in certain places. And I've seen you make no bones about sharing that, both, on your blog as well as, in the book. Um, how did you come to the decision of what your you call it a bliss station looks like, but also um, how has it evolved and does it continue to evolve?
So yeah, the bliss station idea is something I stole from Joseph Campbell, and his idea that you had to have a place or a certain hour of the day where you kind of felt safe and secure and you could kind of access, your more creative side. And the thing that I'm always really zoomed in on with that is that he says there's a place or a time. And so I think sometimes for some of us, if you're a mom with young children, you might not have a place because you're in this like crammed house or whatever, but you might have a time, so like you might be able to take nap time or the few hours before your kids get up or at night or something like that. So I think sometimes, the Cadillac treatment would be, the really luxurious thing would to be have a place and a time. But I think if you don't have time, a place will help a lot. Like if you just need to squeeze things in, a dedicated place helps. And then I think if you don't have a place, then time can be your friend. But I think that there's something about when you do that daily practice or you kind of do that thing that gets you in the mode every day, it helps to return to a place to be regular about it or to do it at a certain time. And there's something about the repetition I think that it's ritualized, it's like when you sit down at a desk, okay, it's time for this work. And I actually have two, you mentioned different zones for doing different kinds of work. I actually have an analog desk and I have a digital desk in my office. And so right now I'm at the digital desk because I'm talking to you and we're on Skype and doing that kind of thing. And then my analog desk doesn't have anything electronic on it. It's just paper and pencils and notebooks and stuff. And I have a set time to go there, in the morning and try to let the ideas happen. And once the ideas happen, I'll pop over to the digital desk and like write about them for a while, or I'll, blog something or share online. And a lot of my day is a kind of dance between those two desks.
One of the things that I think it was John Cleese that said that in order to be truly creative, you need time and space. You can't have one and expect to put your great creative work out there. And same thing with the other. So if you have too much time and not enough space, you feel cramped, you feel constrained. And if you have too much space but not enough time, you feel hurried. And I think that one of the things people get caught up in, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is just the pace of the world and the pace of the day. How do you combat that? Because, I mean, yes, when you get into your own space and you have your own things going on, and I know you mentioned in the book about the idea of, and I don't do this either, waking up and jumping onto any of these, myriad of news sites to learn about what's going on
Yeah.
in the world is not exactly the best way to start your day. But how do you combat like this speed of life and this idea that it's go 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 fast 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 now and in a world where you're trying to really put forth your best possible creative work?
It's a constant struggle, I mean, it's nothing that I have completely figured out. And I'm just as lost some days as other people. But I do know that, what I know for sure is that creativity is definitely about connection, in that you have to be connected to the world in order to be influenced and inspired by it and to have something to say about it. But then you also have to disconnect from the world long enough to discover what it is that you actually have to say about it or what your work is. And so it's really this dance between connection and disconnection that makes the work, and that is actually part of the work. And for me, it's just being connected is easy. I mean, I'm connected all day long. We all are. I mean, I've got my phone in front of me, too often. But the trick is disconnecting. And I just think the easiest way to disconnect is to not connect in the first place. So that's why I love the morning so much. I mean, I really try not to check email or get on Twitter or Instagram or any of that stuff in the morning. I fail a lot, but I just try to schedule, and this is where like the routine comes in. I just try to schedule disconnection time, where no one can find me and I'm just in the zone. But it's difficult, and it's particularly difficult with children, and particularly when you're at home with children, because interruption is the sole fact of your life as a parent. So
I've got it's spring break here right now as we're recording this. So both of my kids are at home. I've got a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old. So they have a bit more self-management control. I think yours probably do after. And actually, here's an interesting thing that I want to talk about boundaries, because I think that you've just touched on that, the idea of having these boundaries and these constraints, because I think they're needed. One of the things that I've done is, and I did this for years because I've been working home for years, is I got like a simple, like the hotel do not disturb signs that you hang outside your door, right?
Oh, yeah.
So all I did
Yeah.
was I have, and it's the only, like I have it outside my door, and if my door is open, come on in. If my door is shut, please knock first, and then I'll respond. If the door is shut with the door knocker on it, don't even. In fact, what's funny is my son to this day, and this has been like 5 years in the making, he assumes that I'm doing a podcast if there is a sign on the door. Like, even though I might be doing a coaching call or something else like that, or I might not be doing
Right.
anything at all, in terms of meeting with someone. There's this boundary that's been created. How important for you are setting up like just simple boundaries that you can adhere to, and then again, making sure that you respect them so that others do as well.
Oh man, so important and so hard. They're just so young right now that they just don't really understand that, what do you mean dad has to go work? It's funny because my kids just think that like they don't really understand that people go to jobs. Like their idea of what work is so bizarrely twisted. Like, and it's funny because my father-in-law is a great writer, but he writes for a newspaper. So he has to go to the office every day. And we were staying with them for a while, and he would get dressed and like ready for work. And my kids would just be like, "What do you mean, where is he going? Why is he dressed up?" And so they just don't really understand work. I'm pretty fluid right now as far as like whether we're playing or we're working. Like I had Owen, my oldest, in the studio with me today just because he was being such a pain to his mom. And we were just like working together. And I don't know, boundaries are weird right now because I just don't have that many. But like, today I've done exactly what you do, which is like the doors closed if not locked, and there's a sign, a do not disturb sign, and everybody knows what's going on. So but I think that it's you the biggest thing that I think about boundaries is something that my wife said, and she said, if you never go to work, you never get to leave work. And so that is particularly helpful, I think, for people who work at home, which is if you're never in dedicated work mode, then you never get out of work mode. It's just kind of this like, so I think that's why for me, like the hours are so helpful to just like, no, I keep banker's hours. Like I don't check email after dinner, or like I don't jump on the computer first thing in the morning, to have those boundaries of, I think that's actually a Cleese thing. He says boundaries of time and boundaries of space, and to have those boundaries is essential, I think.
Well, and I think one of the things that you talk about in the book, and this is not necessarily new, go figure, from the guy who wrote Steal Like an Artist, is the idea of, yes, and I'm a creative too, so I get this, like, you see things, whatever you're looking at, whenever you're out in the world, you will see things and it could inspire you. So you talk, the idea of having a notebook with you or a phone with you, I think that still allows you to kind of foster that creative side of you without necessarily breaking a boundary, right? Like you quickly take a picture, you kind of know what that means, or you'll revisit it later. And we'll talk a bit more about like, the mess and all that stuff a little bit later. But I think that element needs to be there too, because then you've got some flexibility built into it so that you're not feeling, hey, okay, I've punched the clock, it's done. I've got to shut off my creative brain because let's face it, it doesn't shut off.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I think that is the big trade-off with a life of creative work, is it's just, you're just never off, really. I mean, you're never completely done with it, and you're never completely unplugged. I mean, that's something that my wife is just such a great kind of gauge for this for me, is whenever I'm feeling extremely lazy or like I haven't done a lot lately. I mean, she just reminds me all the time that like, you're just never off. Like you're always, you've always got your notebook in your pocket. I mean, you're never off. So, but I do think that just because your mind isn't off doesn't mean that you need input from others. I think that's the real thing, is to not be pulled by anyone, to do your own kind of, to be doing your own pulling at a certain point. I feel like during the day, the minute you open Twitter or you open email, someone can pull your mind in another direction that you might not want it to be pulled. And so it's more of like a freedom thing, even though you're always on and your brain's always on. Like it's more about the freedom of pointing your attention in the direction you want it to go rather than having it scattered.
So, big news, the productivity diet has finally hit the shelves. If you've been listening for a while, you've probably heard me allude to it. This is the book where I lay out a more intentional, sustainable approach to productivity. You can grab it at mikevardy.com/lit or wherever books are sold. And listen, if your favorite bookstore doesn't have it, just ask them to order it in, because this isn't just another productivity book. It's one designed to actually fit your life. Again, The Productivity Diet, a practical guide to nurturing your productive potential. Pick it up anywhere books are sold today. And now let's get back to the show. See, I'm a big believer that productivity isn't about, speed and efficiency and all that. I believe it's, a marriage of intention and attention. And I think after reading your work for a number of years and again, keep going, that seems to be a really prevalent message in there. It's like, where your attention goes. And this comes up in the book, actually, the idea of attention. Why, how do you help, or how do we get more people to realize that, like, as much as time moves on, and again, you touch on this later in the book as well, to think things in terms of attention more necessarily than, let's say, the passage of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think attention can alter time. I mean, we know what that, and I think you can just do like some simple experiments to kind of prove that. I mean, everyone's had that kind of relativity experience where you're completely immersed in something and the hours just fly by, versus like watching the clock tick. And that's just like one example, but to really get people to understand that your life is really what you pay attention to, that like that is exactly what life is made of, is just a really hard step. And it's hard to, particularly in writing, and talking to writers, trying to get them to understand that like your work is made up of what you pay attention to. And then the way that you kind of discover what it is that you have to say is that you pay attention to what you pay attention to. As Amy Krauss Rosenthal said, the late great Amy, and she's in the book, and I just love that, paying attention to what you pay attention to. It's kind of it's a line that has two meanings. One, it's a caution, it's a cautionary thing. Like, well, just pay attention to what you pay attention to, because what you pay attention to is your life. And then the other side of it is the way to figure out what your life is and what you're up to is to pay attention to what you've been paying attention to. So in a very concrete way, like a lot of people talk about writing a diary, and the kind of a lot of people talk about diaries in terms of the therapeutic now. And like, a lot of people write diaries because it makes them feel good in the moment, or they're getting something off their chest, or it's therapeutic at the time, and then they never go back through their diaries. But I'm one of those people, maybe I'm strange, but I find that rereading your diaries is a matter of orientation. It really shows you where you've been and in what direction you've been headed. And maybe it's just because my memory for what happens to me is so terrible. But when I go back through my notebooks, it's a matter of like pattern recognition. Like I can really figure out, what it is that I'm actually trying to get at here this week. Like what's been preoccupying me, and I just find so many clues by going back through my notebooks that that pay attention to what you pay attention to is just like a really powerful thing.
Well, if you're strange, then I'm strange, because I do the same thing. I go back
Yeah.
and look. I actually make a point of, I actually have, and this is where I think you talked about like the idea of having a memory that needs, remember, like almost like a reminder of what happened, because I tend to use, because I capture so much, that I now have become this person that relies on the capture habit more than the retention habit, because my journaling and where I put it ends up becoming the thing that I can go back and reflect upon. And then you can course correct. I'm not a guy who necessarily does what, the traditional quote weekly review or anything like that. I'll go back and look at, it's kind of like like Star Trek, right? Like the captain's log. Here's where we were. Here's where we are now. Here's where we're going. And then, oh, crap, we veered way off course. How the hell did that happen? Oh, this is how it was, because I was feeling this way, or because I didn't pay attention to this. Do you think that because of the fact you're so prolific with what you capture, that may have that you need to journal and diarize, because, hey, listen, my mind isn't necessarily being a warehouse, it's now being, a factory, which is what it really is designed to do.
I mean, that's an interesting way of putting it. I mean, I've always felt like I had a really terrific memory for things that I read, or things that I hear, or things that I take in through media almost. Like I can remember things that I read, I can remember things I watch, I can remember things I listen to. I have a really bad memory for what happens to me, and I can't figure out what that says about me. Maybe that just I've been distracted, from my life by all these different forms of media that I love, but I don't know for sure what that means about me. I just know it works. But I think that you know, I just think the most poisonous thing about our modern moment right now is that everyone wants you to be somewhere other than where you are right now. Like, if you think about, where you're grounded in the world right now, like what you're, where your feet are resting and what you're looking at in front of you and like what you're feeling, and that place, literally everything in the world wants you to think about something else than that. I mean, and it's in the interests of the media companies to do that, to pull you away from your own life into these other places and times. And of course, sometimes we want to be somewhere else. That's what art and literature and film and everything does for us. But I think the coolest thing that making art and making literature and making film can do is to, kind of train you to pay more attention to where you are in the world. And I think that's what it also does for the reader or the viewer, is that it trains them to really pay attention to their own lives. And I think we're losing some of that through just the endless stream of constant bombardment of media that we get now through Twitter and Facebook and all that stuff.
As I go through your work, not just this book, and this book is full of this stuff, but when I go through your work, there's a lot of reference to material that you've read that isn't from necessarily the modern moment, like blog posts or books that are recent. Like, we're looking at like Thoreau, and even books that you're like, oh, like, I forgot about that person, or I never, or I never even thought that this person could relate to necessarily to, like, Brian Eno. I know he's a creative, but it's like he's a music. Like, there's that connection that you've talked about earlier, and you're able to connect those ideas, those thoughts to your work. Do you find yourself looking to the older texts, the older media, the older more and more to inform not only your work, but maybe the message you're trying to put out there, as opposed to, say, what we're seeing now? I'm seeing that more and more, and it's some of that stuff is just timeless, and if anything, we need that stuff now more than ever before.
Yeah, I think if you're like a serious thinker, or, I don't think of myself as a very serious person, actually. I'm kind of more of I don't know how I think of myself, but it's not necessarily serious. But if you're a student of your craft and you're a student of writing and art, and you're not going back as far as you can go, I mean, you're really hobbling yourself. I mean, it sounds really, this sounds absurd, but I'm not sure there's a lot of progress in art. I mean, I as far as linear progress goes, I think that there are cycles, but I think that, as human beings, we kind of circle the same things over and over. And I just find, for me personally, there's something about reading old texts that makes it just strange enough that you will do the work of relating what they're writing about to your own moment. So when you read Thoreau and he's like, I have given up reading the weekly newspaper because, like, I just can't be two places at one time. There's just something so, like, when I read him writing about that in his journal, it makes such a greater impact than reading a blog post someone writes about how Twitter is just making them so upset. Because there's just this universal feeling when I go back in time with Thoreau where it's just like, here's a dude who, 150 years ago, he was dealing with the same exact problem. It just wasn't so massive. And then you kind of readjust yourself because you're like, okay, well, if a weekly newspaper was too much for Thoreau, maybe a weekly paper would be the perfect amount for me. You know what I mean? So, but there's just something about, like, I just think we're in a culture of the now, and to divorce yourself from human history is it's a kind of malnourishment, to not honor what came before you. And of course, there are always new problems, so there's always new writing to be done. But the part of the joy for me of being a writer is to help people go back upstream, so to speak, like swim back upstream to find their way to other things that they might not have been passed down.
As we get close to wrapping up, I want to share one piece from the book that as I got close to the end, and again, anyone who's listening right now, which is obviously the person listening right now, you should be picking up this book because there is so much great stuff in here. But this one particular, the blackout artwork at the end, I plant my garden because what else can I do but fool around with time? So I want to ask you, how do you fool around with time?
Well, we're doing it, We're doing it right now. We're fooling around with time. I mean, I think that, time is the thing you get, and you don't know how much time you get and how much time you're gonna get. But I think time is exactly what we're up against, and it's exactly the real kind of currency that we get to spend in this life. And I think how you spend your time is Annie Dillard, she says, how you spend your days is how you spend your life, and so to not waste it, and if you're gonna waste it, to waste it deliciously. you know to waste it in the best way you can, I think is the best thing you can do. But that's all we're doing. We're just playing around with time, the time we get, and we're just filling the days. And hopefully, you just fill them as well as you can.
Austin, thanks for joining me today on the show. Of course, you can get Keep Going, 10 Ways to Stay Creative in Good Times and Bad on Amazon. Where else can people get it, and where else can people learn more about you and your work, which they definitely should do?
Well, I always encourage everyone to head to their local bookstore and check out a copy there. And if they don't have one, have them order one. And you could also check out your local library. Head in there. And if you want to hang out with me, I'm at austinkleon.com.
That's a wrap on this episode. If you liked what you heard, the best way to support a productive conversation is to share it or leave a quick rating or review wherever you're listening. You can find everything we mentioned at mikevardy.com/podcast598. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, the host of A Productive Conversation, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.